In Jade Cocoon, story of the Tamamayu, you play as Levant, the village's new cocoon master. The village is under attack by the Oni Bubu, the locusts of apocalypse, which put people into a sleep they cannot wake from. Levant, being the new cocoon master, is the only one allowed to cross the barrier and go into the forest to find the calabash herb to save his village. Jade Cocoon, Story of the Tamamayu, is an RPG with a monster-raising component. Combat itself is very simple. You start with Levant, who can fight, use items, or most notably, summon and capture minions. Levant's a cocoon master, and one of the fundamental aspects of that is beating up monsters and subjugating them to fight for you. Captured monsters must be taken to Mabu in the village before they can be used. It's recommended to capture as many monsters as possible before returning to the village just for the sake of time efficiency. Once your captured minions have been processed by Mabu, they can be equipped to your current team roster, merged with other minions, or spun into silk to be sold. The actual combat of Jade Cocoon is rock, paper, scissors. There's a 4-element wheel. It's basic. Water beats fire, which is beaten by air, which is beaten by earth, which beats water, completing the loop. Obviously, this turns Jade Cocoon into a game of hard counters. Battles often devolve into destroying enemies in a single attack through use of elemental weaknesses. As such, you'll want to diversify your party setup, having one of each elemental type of minion. Since you only have 3 slots and there are 4 elements, you'll have to forego one or have some kind of hybrid, which leads to merging and minion management. Merging is the most interesting mechanic in Jade Cocoon. The idea of taking 2 monsters and combining them is pretty novel, but not exactly new. Merging is probably a lot deeper than it seems. At face value, it's a way to haphazardly Frankenstein a minion together with decent abilities and stats, and then you use it for the rest of the game, and stop bothering with merging altogether. There are archetypes for minions. There is a grid with magic attack, speed, and defense. You can't have a minion that has both incredible defense and speed because they're on the same axis and contrary to each other. This means you can't really merge different types of minions. Merging a fast minion with one that's slow with high defense will often result in something that's just mediocre across the board. You'll want to play to your minion's strengths. If it has good defense, merge it with minions that favor defense, and forego speed for the most part. Jade Cocoon does have fixed camera angles, and as a direct result of it, there are tank controls. The triangle button makes Levant run, so you can both move forward with triangle and use the D-pad to make adjustments running around. Tank controls are hit and miss. They tend to work here. There are no random encounters in Jade Cocoon. Enemies appear on the map, and you can make an effort to avoid fighting them should you choose. This is a nice feature, but the corridors you go through are often tight, making avoiding combat incredibly difficult. The fixed camera angles also make running into something from off-screen a very real possibility. Avoiding enemies doesn't really matter. You'll want to be fighting most things that come your way. A lot of maps are straight corridors with few turns, and Levant has some decent pathfinding. If he bumps into a wall, he'll automatically course correct and usually get on the right path regardless of your inputs on the D-pad. This means you don't really need to engage too heavily in the tank controls. Jade Cocoon is mostly fully voiced. There are sections that aren't, but the vast majority of the dialogue is voiced. All the mandatory story dialogue is voiced, and the things that aren't voiced are usually optional exposition, but even some of that is voiced. The delivery of this dialogue is slow, often to an extreme degree. It makes it tempting to just ignore the voice acting altogether and just read it yourself to kinda get on with it.
At long last, has Elrom's day of judgment come to Cyrus?
I do not believe that the divine barrier of Gehenna will hold much longer. We must act. Do you not think so, High Priestess Garai?
There's a clear influence from Studio Ghibli, so if you're a fan of films like Princess Mononoke, you'll enjoy the art style. This may be a minor gripe, but your minions rarely look cool. The minions that bosses have often look unique and cool. They get things like winged raptors and giant pairs of legs. You usually get some ugly bug lizard hybrid who looks like he belongs in the remedial class. Jade Cocoon's story is interesting if you let yourself get invested in it. There is rich history and lore, but you have to seek it out. The way Jade Cocoon delivers its main and optional story is slow exposition dumps that you really have to just sit through to get the most out of it. The actual narrative is a bit weak and kind of boring. A major plot point is that Levant's father, Riquettes, went missing, and there's a mysterious masked dream man. Gee, I wonder who it is. Another major plot point is that the forest is too dangerous for anyone but a Cocoon Master, but all of Levant's friends are actively going in there regardless of whether or not Levant has unlocked the barrier.
There are rumors of men who disguise themselves as Cocoon Masters to poach game here. You may be one of them.
My young friend was bragging so much. You don't know who it is? His name is Kelmar. He is strong, you know. He's my best friend. What? You're friends with him too? Oh, so it's you. The Cocoon Master he was talking about.
Louis and Kelmar actively go into the beetle and dragonfly forests and are friends with some of the denizens. It's really strange. What's the point of the barriers if everyone can just come and go as they please? The main story kind of lacks a reasonable conclusion, and often just feels like you're doing arbitrary fetch quests, even if they are related to your end goals of getting the Calabash herb. The difficulty in Jade Cocoon is kind of interesting. Levant doesn't actually level up in traditional ways. Leveling up his capture level increases your success chance at capturing minions and his cocoon stocks rather than his actual statistics. The only stat he can increase outside of gear upgrades is his health, which comes from uncommon drops from monsters. Levant is initially a lot stronger than your minions, but minions quickly surpass him in power and durability. This is to the point where Levant won't even be able to defeat even the most trivial minions in the later forests on his own. There is an inherent problem with this, only really notable during boss encounters. To use items, you need to be using Levant. After the Dragonfly Forest, which is the second forest you enter, he's weaker than all your minions, even if he's well equipped. This means in the even later forests, when Levant has about 110 to 120 health depending on your luck with drops, and your minions are in the 400 plus range, he's incredibly susceptible to just dying. On the final bosses, swapping to Levant to heal your damaged minions can be a death sentence, especially if the boss gets a double turn due to higher speed, which, as Levant, you have extremely limited ways to increase. It's a catch-22. You need to pull out Levant to heal your minions, but in doing so, you run the very real risk of just losing the battle. It's not fun or enjoyable to do that. This turns most of the boss battles into damage races and hoping you can kill them with your 3 minions, or pray you can get a heal off from Levant and switch him out before he suffers a death blow. All that being said, there really isn't a punishment for dying. You're simply shown some extra dialogue from the boss and booted out of the forest. You do a quick run back to the Nagi Mage and get a heal and head back on in. If you couldn't beat the boss, you're not ready to move on to the next forest. Getting kicked out of the forest isn't even really a punishment, it just facilitates moving you back to the start to grind a bit more or capture more minions for merging before another attempt. There is a point of no return in Jade Cocoon and it appears kind of out of the blue. You can end up in a bit of a bad situation without healing items. If you didn't get adequate healing items before this point, you can definitely be in a rough spot. It's a brief period, and once you get through it, you're given back access to your merging and shops. To reiterate, there's no real punishment for dying, so just be conservative with your items if you're low and you should get through it okay. Jade Cocoon's introduction is very long and very dry. If you're watching all the cutscenes and listening to all the voice acting, it can take up to 45 minutes before you even get a chance to really do anything. And with ignoring most of the optional content, Jade Cocoon, Story of the Tamamayu, was completed in 8 hours, 32 minutes, and 56 seconds. Jade Cocoon is very slow-paced. It's the kind of game that's best enjoyed if you sit down, relax, get invested, and take your time with it. Explore for the optional content, listen to the in-game stories, visit all the locations in the town frequently, do the various tasks that the villagers ask you to do, which act as side quests. The pace of the game is so slow that you most definitely need to be in the mood for a game like it. If you're looking for something exciting at all, Jade Cocoon is not it, no matter how you try and spin it. Even compared to other RPGs on the PlayStation, it's just not very exciting and pretty dull. It's just that everything being slow really adds up. Battles are aggravatingly slow. You watch the battle intro, then you watch Levant summon his minion, then you do the battle. If you want to capture the minion for merging or to sell it, you have to switch back to Levant, then do the capture song. To say that it gets old is an understatement. It's old after the second forest, and you still have 5 more to get through. At points, your minions are capable of 1 or 2-shotting the enemies, but the battles still feel like they take forever for these really long cutscenes. And once you've filled up on your firefly cocoons, you have to go back to Mabu, and she does her spiel and her unskippable animations for spinning your cocoons. Then, if you want to do some merging, you have another unskippable animation every single time you merge. It just drags on and on and on. And the thing about Jade Cocoon is it's fairly small in scale. It's not a big game. There are only 7 forests to go through, and 3 of them are just straight up recolors, which was a huge disappointment. Not even an attempt was made to shuffle the maps around a little bit. They are 1-to-1 copies with a slight variance to colors. The Dark World versions of the Beetle, Dragonfly, and Spider forests are just awful, and are so extremely disappointing that it mars the entire experience. After completing the game, you can enter the Endless Corridor mode. This lets you continually progress through an infinite series of forests with harder and harder minions. It would be a nice feature, but Jade Cocoon's slow pace of rock, paper, scissors combat makes it way more tedious than actually enjoyable. Jade Cocoon, at first glance, seems really fun and unique, but maybe isn't as unique as it initially seems. The idea of raising monsters to fight for you is present in a lot of games, from Pokemon to Monster Rancher. Merging is a neat concept and mechanic, but often isn't rewarding enough, and base minions you've trained are often equivalent or better than merged ones. It's a short game, but it's so slow paced that it feels a lot longer. There is tons of recycled content, which feels especially lazy in a game that is so short. Jade Cocoon really rides that line between verdicts. It's charming, but it plays at a snail's pace. It's got some cool mechanics, but they aren't unique or done well enough to justify playing it over something else. It's easy, but still requires a good amount of grinding due to bosses being much more difficult than standard enemies. It has a beautiful art style and art direction, but the story doesn't really go anywhere unless you invest a lot of time into investigating the backstory and lore. Jade Cocoon may be worth playing for some people, but in all honesty, it's just not worth slogging through the slow battles for the few fun moments. Jade Cocoon, Story of the Tamamayu, gets recommended playing's most disgraceful verdict of not recommended.
Right. You can go do it. Here's the beetle key. Use it to enter the beetle gate. Beetle key.
Beetle key. Beetle key.